Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
It was a great day to live in Winona County today. It was just a top 10 day all the way around. So let's make it a top 10 night. Huh? We will call the meeting with public comment. Anyone wishing to address the public and the board for public comment? Seeing no one step forward, we will move on to approval of the county board minutes from July 10th.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jacob, second by Commissioner Olson to approve the meeting minutes from July 10th. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Meeting minutes approved. Consent comments and approval of the agenda. Mr. Fritz?
I'd like to pull 5.4 so the highway engineer can give us an update on the bid results.
All right, so 5.4 become, that will be quick and short, so we'll make that 6.0. All right.
That's it.
Commissioner Kavesi?
Nothing for me, please.
Commissioner Pomeroy? Commissioner Olson? Commissioner Jacob?
I guess if we've got the highway engineer here, maybe pull 5.5, a couple questions on that fiber.
Okay, so we'll make that 6.01. Attorney?
No, thank you.
Okay, and I have just a couple comments at the end of the meeting. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Pomeroy, second by Commissioner Jacob to approve the amended agenda. Any questions or concerns, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. If you would read the consent business, Mr. Fritz.
I'll do that. Consent Business Department recommendations. 5.1, approve joint powers agreement with the Office of the Secretary of State. 5.2, approve resolution for Minnesota Trail Assistance Program. 5.3, approve monthly resolution. 5.4 and 5.5 have been pulled for further discussion. 5.6, confirm payment of disbursements. And that is the consent agenda.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Pomeroy to approve the consent business and department recommendations. Any questions, concerns? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. So 6.0, which was originally 5.4, and good evening, Mr. Kramer.
Good evening.
We have some additional information that just came this afternoon.
Correct. We opened bids on this project yesterday. That's summarized in the sheet that you have there, and we recommend awarding to Dunn Blacktop.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask.
Jacob.
Or,
Commissioner Jacob.
it was just open yesterday. Is that as long as a bid window is generally open?
The project was advertised, meeting the advertising requirements, which
So these people who could potentially bid on it have known about it for some time?
yes, I believe it's advertised 3 times, with the last time being 2 weeks before bid opening. So there's an extended time frame. We actually opened the bids yesterday.
Okay.
But it's been advertised, had been advertised for the required time ahead of that.
Okay. And so how long is a bid window typically open?
It's been a little while since I've looked at that exactly, but I want to say it's advertised, it's 2 or 3 successive weeks, with the last advertisement being 10 days before the bid opening.
And then the bid is the opening. How long is the window open?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, so you said that these, it was open yesterday.
Yes.
And these came in today, you said?
No, I'm sorry. I meant maybe you misunderstood. We received the information today.
Okay. So it's only open for one day. I mean,
We advertised for bids for a several-week period. With the bid opening was scheduled at 1 p.m. yesterday. So they had to have their bids in by 1 p.m. yesterday. After 1 p.m., we opened the bids. We had 2 bids. I finished putting this together this morning, and this document.
have you seen this Green Dream International bid on anything before?
No.
Is that
Yeah, Alexandria.
That was my
Out east.
curiosity.
Yeah,
so.
Alexandria,
From
Virginia.
Alexandria, Alexandria, Virginia. Apparently, they have some offices in the Midwest, not any in Minnesota that I'm aware of. We've not seen it before. It's kind of it's an oddball thing to get a bid like that, frankly.
Okay. And then I'm going to ask one question on, I've talked to Tim Fort on how we do our packing on that shouldering with rubber tired packers and kind of hoping, praying for rain to help pack it in. Do they have any requirements to use like a roller packer, steel roller packer, or is there any, how are we requiring these bid work to be done?
Troy put the bid documents together. I didn't go through them in detail myself. I know that Houston County has done this, and we basically borrowed their documents and revised them and used them. I'm sure there's specifications for compacting that, but exactly what it says, I don't know off the top of my head. I can certainly find that out and provide it.
Well, the reason I ask is because I just saw some work being done in Wabasha County. They laid down a layer of concrete, then they had large water trucks putting a lot of water on, then the steamroller type roller. Second layer of crushed rock. For one layer crushed rock, water, steamrolled. Second layer crushed rock, water, steamrolled. And when they got done, it was about as hard as cement. So I'm just wondering, that's much different than what we're doing with the rubber tired packers, and I'm wondering what we're requiring of the people that we open it to bids for.
Yeah, grading an entire road width and packing that with a steel drum.
Just the shoulders that they were doing.
That was the shoulders.
That's what they're
Okay.
doing. That's how they were doing the shoulders.
Okay. We'll talk to them and take a look at that.
Okay, so, all right.
And Commissioner Pomeroy, was your question?
No, my
was
question
answered?
was about the second bid.
Right. Okay. Well, and so the public knows this is an issue that comes up quite often when I'm out and about, is the shouldering of the roads. We've had, with the rains we've had the last couple, springs, the deluge, the hard, it really takes a lot of, it washes a lot. So this is a safety thing. And I am glad to see a number of our 3-digit roads that are getting attention too, because they are in desperate need of it. So I would entertain a motion to approve the bid.
I'll move to award the bid to Dunn Blacktop Company.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs, second by Commissioner Pomeroy to award the Dunn Blacktop Company the bid for the aggregate shouldering project. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. Thank you. Now, 6.01, which was 5.5, and this is the approval of supplemental agreement to add fiber reinforcement to CASA 25 concrete overlay project. Commissioner Jacob, you had some.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. First of all, do you have any background on the fiber reinforcement? What's your level of confidence that this is going to significantly extend the life of a road that's already quite a bit extended from what concrete's supposed to last longer than pavement to begin with, right?
Yes.
Okay, and this is supposed to significantly increase the length of the concrete's life?
Yes.
That's why we would be, the main reason we would be doing it?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there anything other than guesses on what that life expectancy might, how much that might be extended?
No.
Okay, all right. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
I would expect 10 plus years. But the pavement itself is, based on the flexural strength of the concrete and the 5-inch thickness designed for a 35-year life. With the concrete is inherently strong in compression and weak in tension. So like if you had a beam, if it was just concrete unreinforced, it would snap on the bottom side. Mm-hmm. The fiber adds a tensile strength component to the concrete. It will reduce the amount of cracks. It will increase the pavement's resiliency for repeated heavy loads, overloads, reduce thermal cracking where the temperature changes tend to cause cracks. Yeah, exactly how long this would extend the pavement life, we really won't know for decades, but we have every confidence that it will be money well spent.
Okay. So what percentage of this road is paid by the state and what percent is paid by the county? I'm not asking about the fiber reinforcement. I'm asking about what are the percentages?
This project has federal funding in it, and that is the federal highway funds can fund a maximum of 80%. So there's a 20% local portion, which just means non-federal. We're using our CASA, our county state aid highway funds for the remaining portion. So roughly 80% is coming from federal funds and 20% from our CASA apportionment from the Highway Users Tax Distribution Fund.
So, but when I looked at the numbers of what this was going to cost and how much was going to be covered, it looked like it was about 66% roughly that we're going to pay. And where's the rest coming from?
That's the federal funds.
Why isn't that 80%?
The federal funds for this project as a whole were apportioned in a specific dollar amount. For our original bid, the 80% maximum that those could cover still left some federal funds unused. That's the 115,000.
106, okay.
Yeah, and then the remainder,
So we're using up the rest of those funds,
yes.
okay. So this is a way to take advantage of that, for sure. Yeah. So I have a little bit of a hard time putting faith in that we're going to spend $200,000 in something that could extend the life between 35 and 45 years. But if that was a guarantee that it was going to, and I was, not working for the county, just working for myself, I would say, yeah, absolutely. If we're going to extend the life 20, 25%, definitely worth doing. So I guess I can support it. I don't know if anyone else has questions on it.
Commissioner Pomeroy.
How long has the product been in the field?
Fiber reinforcement of this type has been used, I know, well in excess of 10 years. This specific material, I'm not sure if that's listed on their data sheet. Otherwise, I'm not sure.
Commissioner Olson.
Dave, I guess my question would be, the original project was bid without any reinforcement?
Yes.
That's not normal, is it?
That's normal for a concrete overlay, yes.
You wouldn't do that for a driveway. Okay, that's all I have.
You don't put wire forms or rebar or anything in the concrete?
Not in a 5-inch overlay. Typically, if it's not an overlay project where you've maybe graded a road and are just paving concrete as the original pavement, that might be more of a 7-inch thick. And that would typically will have dowel bars at the joints just to keep the joints from faulting. You drive over a concrete road and you feel that bump, bump, bump. That's from the concrete faulting I don't need to explain the mechanism of how that happens, but the dowels in there would reduce that from taking place. But as far as reinforcing the panels itself, there is none actually in those either. It's just the concrete itself. So in this case, typically a 5-inch thick overlay, concrete overlay, those get cut into 6-foot by 6-foot panels, which is smaller than you'd cut the thicker concrete. It's been used in Iowa counties for decades, this approach. They've used it on the Min Road project with I-94 traffic on it with very good success. I mean, I've viewed concrete on a county road in Iowa that's been down for 30 years and you couldn't tell that it's, not any more than 3 or 5 years old. It's in outstanding shape.
Commissioner Jacob.
So if this isn't that new, this fiber reinforcement, why wasn't it recommended right from the start? Why did it come as an after thought?
Why now?
Wait a minute, you should do this. Why wasn't it incorporated into the bid to begin with?
That's a good question. Minnesota concrete projects haven't been using this. We basically got the idea from MnDOT doing it as a test with several different products on their project earlier this year with the same contractor. Based on the, having looked at that and the thoughts from both the MnDOT engineers and the contractor who's been, doing this type of work for decades.
Crowell?
Yeah, Kroll. Yeah, we're excited about it.
Okay. And Kroll's been using it elsewhere and they're familiar with it. They've been mixing it. This isn't going to be their first time.
This is not their first time. They used it on the MnDOT project. Whether they, to the extent that they've
Highway
done
63?
this on, yes. To the extent that they've done this on projects beyond that, I'm not familiar with.
Commissioner Kavesi.
I just had a question about the daily vehicle traffic. How busy is this road?
I think I have that.
Sorry. It's kind of a main road between Lewiston and Rolling Stone.
Yes.
Yeah,
Stockton.
Stockton, yeah.
Towards the south end near Lewiston, 1,600 cars a day, 1,650. It kind of falls off as you go north, closer to Rolling Stone, about 500 vehicles a day.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple questions, and I think they'd get answered, why and why now. I'm disappointed that it's that much as an after effect on a very expensive road project, but I know the neighborhood is very excited about this road project. I know I won't be here in 35 years to tell you we did it right or did it wrong.
45 at least.
Yeah, I won't be here. I know I won't be here. And I guess we still do have funds and everything. It is, though, anytime you read a warranty on page 77 is our warranty. I love this warranty. The exclusive remedy for defective product shall be to replace the product or refund the purchase price. Will it be the current purchase price or will it be the price we paid? And how are you going to take the stuff out if it fails? You're going to chip up all the. I mean, I love warranties. They should be written on gray paper and not taken seriously. It just doesn't. It defies common sense.
And that's only the purchase price of the product, not the purchase
Not the
price
labor.
of the installation.
Yeah, and stuff. So, I mean, again, it has a warranty, but it's a warranty that's, not.
And they're just going to.
It doesn't satisfy me.
They're not going to replace.
The concrete that's around the fiber, and we're going to pay to take the concrete out and everything. But anyway, that's their warranty, and that's my take on that. So, any other questions for Dave at this time on this project?
Move to approve?
Second.
We have a motion made by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Jacob to approve the addition of the fiber reinforcement. Oh, I do have one question. Will this delay the project at all?
No.
No. Okay, so we're still on time and good time. Because you did note, yes, the culverts have all been replaced, and I was in that neighborhood, and it's drivable.
Will it speed it up?
It won't.
Because because
it
it should be.
actually may-
Yeah, you should be able to drive on it sooner, right?
It actually may,
Speed it up.
speed things up from that standpoint that they're able to put traffic on it sooner.
Okay. All right, that's good to know. All right, the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. All right, thank you. We don't want to have to use that warranty, tell them. Okay, moving on. 6.1, we are here to receive the Minnesota Intercounty Association, MICA, Annual Legislative Update. Good evening, Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. I'm Keith Carlson, Executive Director of the Minnesota Intercounty Association. It's a pleasure to be here once again. I was just reflecting that this is probably my 20th year reporting to this board. That dates back to the old courthouse before the sprinkler disaster that caused the move to this facility. With me today are Ryan Erdman, Steve Novak, and Nancy Selesky, who will follow me to the podium. I'm going to start off with sort of an overview of this past session and its implications for Winona County, and then they'll cover sort of the respective areas, and then I'll have just a few closing comments. To start off with, probably no surprise for you, there were really three bills that were the main agenda of this past legislative session. A tax bill to conform or respond to recent federal changes, a supplemental budget bill, and a bonding bill. The legislature ended up batting 1 for 3 on those items. There was no tax bill, it was vetoed twice by the governor. No supplemental budget bill, also vetoed by the governor. But we did get a bonding bill enacted. As a consequence for individuals as well as corporations, when they go to prepare their returns for the 2018 tax year for individuals in the late winter and spring of 2019, they'll have sort of a complicated task that they'll have to prepare their federal return based on the new law, but their state return based on the old law. So all the old itemized deductions, personal exemptions, standard deductions will apply. That does sound complicated, and it is, but the fact of the matter is, even if the tax bill had been passed, basically the same thing would have occurred because the legislation passed by the legislature, at least for the individual income tax, preserved all those old itemized deductions, standard deductions, and personal exemptions. With regards to the supplemental budget, obviously no new money, but also there were a number of policy changes, several affecting the environmental area, and possibly more importantly from a county perspective, human services changes, both supported by our organization and AMC that ultimately didn't get enacted, and Nancy will touch on those a little bit more. The bonding bill, as I said, passed. Great news. Provides $825 million of additional general obligation bonding authority, 178 of what are called appropriation bonds, and 416 of trunk highway bonds. A large part of the bill then was really dedicated to transportation, $545 million in total, and Steve will touch on that more. Thing I want to emphasize is $400 million of that goes to what's called corridors of commerce, which includes Highway 14. Its completion has a 4-lane from Mankato to Rochester, but that does not become available until 2022. So it's really delayed 4 years before we'll see the effects. Steve again will touch on the status of a possible constitutional amendment dedicating more of the proceeds of the sales tax on auto parts to transportation. And the final item I want to touch on, again, Nancy will cover it in more detail, is we did get some good news in the area of mental health with $30 million authorized for what are called mental health crisis centers and $30 million for supportive housing for the mentally ill. Midlars was another item that was bad news. The system that the state uses for administering drivers and vehicle licenses as well as titling of automobiles and trucks. Ryan will go through that in more detail. Again, they've added basically over 1, 2, or 3, depending on which bills you count. They only provided $10 million of funding for what was an initial request of $43 million. Again, Ryan will touch on that in more detail. The one thing that was kind of unspoken about this session was that there was a lot of effort to relax environmental regulations. Almost all of those were in this supplemental budget bill, and again, as a result of the veto, it didn't happen. Those changes would have included changes in the sulfide standards, particularly important to the iron mining and copper mining industry in northern Minnesota vis-a-vis its effects on wild rice stands. Legislative approval of various water pollution fees, changes in the siting procedure for the Line 3 or Enbridge pipeline. And I'll skip over the rest, just go to the last one. That's relaxation of the fertilizer application standards or rules that We're in process with the Department of Agriculture, and in fact, they are having hearings on that right now. The legislature, in a separate bill called the Agricultural Policy Bill, tried to suspend those regulations. The governor vetoed that. But nevertheless, the legislature was successful in delaying those rules until the end of the 2019 session. And I can answer questions about those if you want more details. The good news is that as a result of all this, a pretty healthy balance was left on the bottom line. About $419 million remains uncommitted, unobligated for the next session, according to their official end of session estimates. Since then, we've received reports on the state's revenue collections to date, and at the conclusion of the state's fiscal year 2018, which ended on June 30th, they were another $348 million ahead. So over $700 million is on the bottom line, but that's in contrast to what they projected would be inflationary cost of $1.2 million. So they're roughly still $500 million short if they fund what are estimated to be the inflationary cost increases in all programs. They don't necessarily have to do that, but the practice is, particularly in some high-profile programs such as aids to education, that they do routinely. The big problem is the funding of programs that come from what's called the Healthcare Access Fund, whose primary, if not nearly exclusive revenue, is the 2% tax on medical providers, doctors, hospitals, so on. That is scheduled to expire on 12/31/19. So no new money coming in, but a huge obligation that they need to continue to fund. Historically, that's been MinCare, but since 2014, really the federal government funds most of that program. What the Healthcare Access Fund is used for primarily nowadays is to fund medical assistance or to supplement the general fund. They're obligated in the next biennium for over $1 billion. And that means a problem. You know, the legislature has just begun to dance around the edges of this issue. As probably many of you know, they looked at adding work requirements for medical assistants. That clearly didn't work because the proposal that they had actually would have cost the state $9 million, not saved them money. In addition, would have imposed substantial cost on counties, an estimated $245 million, or $284 million for the next biennium for our oversight regulation of the individuals who were subject to those work requirements. Even if they had totally eliminated one of the pieces of medical assistance, adults without children that have become eligible for medical assistance since 2011, that would only save them about $400 million. That would still leave a $300 million a year gap that they must address, or, you know, they should address before this tax expires, come up with how are we going to proceed into the future. So with that, I'm going to close things up unless you have some questions for me and turn things over to Ryan.
We'll wait till the end, Keith. Thank you.
Commissioners, again, my name is Ryan Urban. I cover corrections and public safety for MICA as well as AMC, wearing my MICA hat today. Just a couple of things I'll talk about. There's a lot of stuff in your packets in the report that's things that didn't happen, so I won't belabor those points. And you can read about them if you want to know, and I can take questions at the end too. But Keith talked a little bit about MNLARS and the issues with that system. I'm sure your license center downstairs has been experiencing those issues. State asked for $43 million. They said they needed $10 million of it in the first week of session, which they didn't quite get, but they got it around the third week of the session. And that was to fund positions and contractors to work on the system to fix the critical issues with the MNLARS system. And one of the conditions they put on with that $10 million was a legislative oversight committee that meets quarterly. The most recent meeting of that was in early June, and the state has reported that $10 million, depending on exactly which projects they prioritize, is going to run out sometime between August and October of this year. So at that point, we're back to square one, sending cancellation notices to those contractors, and our progress will be very, very slow. Even if they'd gotten the entire 43 million, they were talking about the end of this calendar year and even into 2019 before a lot of the critical functions are actually going to be fixed. That timeline stretches out, barring action of the next legislative session, that pushes those critical fixes out even further. Layered on top of that is the Real ID coming online this fall. Hopefully that system is being built by a contractor that apparently has done this in other states, so there's some reason for optimism that at least that system will work, but it is going to be a workload issue for your deputy registrar office downstairs, just in terms of the processing that goes along with that. To address those issues, the legislature did pass a standalone bill with $9 million in reimbursements to help offset the costs you've already incurred over the first year of MNLARS. That was vetoed by the governor. One, he disapproved of the special revenue fund that they were using to fund it, and he also didn't want that separate from fixes to the system. In the omnibus bill, they included another $5 million, that then obviously tied to the system, but as you know, the politics of that omnibus bill took the whole thing down. Obviously, his agencies wanted this money. He didn't veto it because of this, but it's not there. So there's no reimbursements, there's no fixes for the system, and we have an issue to watch going forward in terms of how they roll out the Real ID and the driver's license issue. So that's ongoing with no, I'm here admiring the problem and not offering you a solution because there isn't one. I mean, until the legislature acts or something different happens, it's going to continue to be an issue for your deputy registrar office and for your citizens that are trying to interact with that system. The one other thing I'll mention, and again, it's kind of in the didn't happen category. In the omnibus bill, the Department of Corrections had sought money for their offender health care contract. Last year in the 2017 session, they'd only had the first year of their contract funded because they were undergoing renegotiation. Turned out in some ways to be a wise move by the legislature because they'd been asking for $11 million last year. After the RFP and the renegotiation, that came down to $7 million. So it was looking like a wise move. However, the veto of the omnibus bill took down that appropriation. They are obligated. They not only do they have a contract, but they're constitutionally obligated to provide offender health care, just like all of our jails. So the effect of that is essentially a $7 million cut to the Department of Corrections. The good news is, and I know the DOC provides your field services here, the funding that offsets your contract costs here is in the Community Services Division. That's budgeted for separately by the legislature than the Facilities Division, and that's where the $7 million is going to come from. So the good news is there is no financial impact to counties on their probation and field services side of that cut. Those funds can't be reduced in order to offset the $7 million. The trickle-down impact to your community could be that they're going to have to take that from programming, whether it's reentry programming or treatment or other functions. I think, and this is purely speculation on my part, that DOC had no plans to reduce staffing. After the incident in Stillwater last week that I'm sure you're all aware of, I can be certain that there's no way they're going to take that $7 million cut out of it in a staffing. So it's going to be programming to offenders. Those offenders are coming back to your communities. We can hope that the trickle down is nothing, but there is the potential for some impact on the local community, but it's not from a purely financial perspective, the county funds won't be an issue with that. I'll leave it there. We've got a couple more speakers here. I'll happily take questions, but like I said, most of the rest of my report didn't happen, so don't need to dwell on it.
I do have a question. Is it still the attitude of the Department of Corrections to allow counties to take on the problem of finding places for these inmates?
In terms of their overpopulation situation in the Department of Corrections, yes, though through some changes they've made to processes, plus drug reform changes that were passed by the legislature now 2 sessions ago, their out-of-facility population has diminished greatly. A couple of years ago, it was as high as 600 to 700 inmates per day were in county jails. I have no idea what the current number is, but last time I had a conversation with the DOC was late in the session, so April, May kind of time frame, and they were down to like 160 or 180 housed in county jails. Like I said, it's a whole variety of factors, some that they control, some that they don't. But they're sitting at a better place now, and those folks are, but that surplus is housed in county facilities. On contract. I mean, the
Right.
counties that have those folks are paid for them,
But I've been told those contracts are very underfunded. or
Yeah.
that's too general of a statement?
I think there's a lot of nuance there that gets into the actual marginal cost of a handful of extra offenders. I mean, if you look at your jail per diem, and every jail is going to be different, and there's a huge range across the state. And if you look at your straight per diem, what it costs per day, and what they pay, it looks like they're underpaying. Now, on the other hand, if you have a jail with 150 people in it, and you take 20 DOC offenders, that actual marginal cost to add 20 to what you're already paying may actually be less than what that contract amount is, but that's going to vary from jail to jail as well. So it kind of depends on what numbers you're comparing.
Sure. And you've been in government at your level for a long time. So with the change of administration, we all have new governor, and do you think like all the commissioners will be changed, and do we anticipate any revelation of?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think if the party of the new governor is the same, there may be a handful of commissioners. I couldn't begin to guess which ones, but there may be some commissioners and deputy commissioners, those things that make that transition. Probably not very many. If the party of the governor changes, then they all change, and that goes down a few layers into every agency. So that's going to be a determining factor. And again, if it's a Democrat, if we've got another DFL, sure, there'll be a handful of commissioners who they are. I know it won't be the Commissioner of Corrections because he's announced that he's just retiring because he has a retirement age. And there's a couple of others that are in that boat. But there certainly may be agency commissioners that carry over. But which ones?
Sure.
I'm not quite deeply embedded enough to know.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other questions for Ryan?
All right. Thank you.
Good evening. Steve Novak, I handle transportation. It's always good to be in Winona County. So let me give you a quick review of what happened transportation this year. Like has been previously stated, up until 10 minutes before the end of the session, if the bonding bill hadn't passed, we wouldn't have much to talk about at all. But it did. And there was a significant amount of money applied towards transportation overall, $545 million roughly. But as was also previously stated, unfortunately, a small fraction of that number is going to local roads and bridges. And let me be specific, $35 million for local roads, $5 million for local bridges. The $416 million that's applied to trunk highway bonds, which is where the money will be for, as an example, Highway 14, is allocated in the following manner. $150 million in fiscal year 2022, $150 million in fiscal year 2023, and a final $100 million in fiscal year 2024. Moving on, another important issue to counties around the state, also process affects your local construction season. That's the local road wetland replacement program, where we were suggesting to the legislature that the appropriation be $16.5 million. Instead, the bill came out of the House and Senate with $5 million. We continued to meet with them, did get it moved up to $6.7 million. We hope that'll be enough. We won't really know till the end of this year probably whether that'll be enough money to get them through the spring construction season. We had this issue developed back in 2017, and it called for special emergency legislation to save the spring construction season. Hopefully that won't be necessary in 2019, but it could be. So that's one we'll have to keep our eye on. The issue of the sales tax on auto parts and whether it should be constitutional or not was explored in some detail during the legislative session. Hearings were held in both houses, lots of discussions behind the scenes. In the end, it did pass the House, but did not come up for a vote in the Senate, so it is not on the ballot this fall. But the statutory transfer of the money does continue. As you may recall, when it passed last year, in the end, after the conference committee, unlike how it was introduced, which was a full 100% transfer, it transferred at roughly 20%, $62 million, instead of the full amount, which would be about $307 million. That transfer will continue statutorily in the next biennium up to about $120 million, so it's moving in the right direction. But speeding that up through one mechanism or another, will continue to be a goal of ours. on a couple of important but somewhat non-financial related issues that I think you have had your eye on over the last couple of years. The ditch mowing haying issue was discussed in a significant fashion. It followed on the heels of a number of meetings that were held around the state by the DOT with all of the different affected groups, the various environmental groups, the bird and fish groups, the farm groups, the government groups. They were unable to come to an agreement, a comprehensive agreement that would resolve it to everyone's interest, so the legislators involved passed legislation to extend the moratorium for one more year and hopefully come to a comprehensive solution in the 2019 session. Finally, truck weights. There was a bill that was widely heard in committee involving certain types of sanitation trucks. That was the major movement on truck weights this session. It went into the supplementary budget bill, which, as you heard, was vetoed. So the net result on truck weights for this past session is there were no changes whatsoever. And the final thing I want to say is to just simply compliment and thank Dave, your county engineer. He participates in a significant way with our MICA meetings, our county engineers, and we appreciate his input, and no, he does a good job for you. So I'll be happy to answer questions later if that's what you would like.
Maybe just, I got one quick question right now. So does the moratorium mean that farmers can continue to mow their road ditches for another year?
Essentially, yes.
I do have a question on the money like Highway 14, because neighbors to the west were elated that they got that. But is it normal to delay it to like 20, 22, and 23, and 24? Or is that some type of finance smoke and mirrors?
Well, I don't know that it's finance smoke and mirrors. I mean, I think the money will be there on the schedule that's stated, but there's money in the pipeline, and for whatever combination of reasons, they decided to put it farther down the road.
So the money we're collecting in 19 and 20 and 21, are they taking part of that then and setting it aside? Or are they spending all that and hoping?
Well, these are, they're trunk highway bonds, and what we've been pushing for unsuccessfully in recent years is actual general fund money generated by either the gas tax or fees, or the issue that's been in front of us has been the transfer of the general fund money. Just to quickly review the last 3 years of this debate, going back a couple of years ago when the DFL was in Senate DFL hands, House was in Republican hands, there was a pretty public, wide open debate about how the state should go forward to fund roads and bridges in the future. And the Senate's position essentially was to go the traditional route of constitutionally dedicated money and gas tax and various types of license fees. The Republican House interjected a new idea, which was to take advantage of existing sales taxes, and in the end they focused on sort of the centerpiece of their plan, which was sales tax on auto parts, which is a significant item. The most important thing that came out of that debate was a very public agreement between the two parties on the size and scope of the transportation infrastructure crisis in Minnesota, and it was pegged at $6 billion over 10 years. In other words, producing $600 million in new money every year for the next 10 years to bring the system back to where it should be, which seems like a pretty monumental task, and it has been. If there's any kind of a narrow slice of light on this thing, a solution would be to combine the two approaches. If you've completed either statutorily or through a constitutional amendment the complete transfer of the sales tax on auto parts, you'd roughly have half the solution. And if you applied an 8-cent gas tax, you'd have the other half. I realize the gas tax has been controversial, but as we all sit here in the last 6 weeks, we've watched the price of gas go up 20 to 25 cents a gallon. And so these things do go up and they do go down, but if it happened to be a part of a gas tax increase combined with the sales tax transfer, you actually would solve this problem and take it off the sheet of many problems we have. So I just leave that for you to digest.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Nancy Selesky, and I handle Health and Human Services for MICA, and it's a pleasure being here tonight in Winona County. As Keith and others have already mentioned, the bonding bill was the Health and Human Services' biggest win as well. They did put almost $30 million into mental health crisis centers, and those will be awarded by competitive grants. And they also put $30 million into housing for persons with behavioral health needs. Finally, they invested in school safety grants and safe routes to schools. So that was kind of the win in Health and Human Services as well. I think, as you all know, your financial workers continue to wrestle with the MET system. And there's been a lot of discussion with the department, with the legislature on that from county folks, commissioners, and others that it's just not operating properly. Probably halfway through the session, the department finally acknowledged that there were some defects in the software, and the periodic data match that we're supposed to be doing was delayed as a result while they try and work this out. So what they're doing is field testing PDM to make sure that it's working before that goes statewide. They're in the process of selecting 9 counties to do that, 3 large counties, 3 medium, and 3 small. And then there's a work group that will analyze that data in October with a final feedback in November. So we'll be seeing PDM at some point, but right now they are going through this field testing process. Talked about the supplemental budget bill. Again, it was vetoed. I just want to point you to page 11 of the report. Those couple of pages do have a number of MICA priorities that were included in the bill. And I just want to run through those real quickly for you. There was language that would have created an appeals process that's related to the 100% cost share. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Page 90 in our packet.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you. It would have created an appeals process related to the 100% cost share that counties pay when a person no longer meets medical criteria at the Anoka Metropolitan Regional Treatment Center and the CBHH hospitals. So that had been included. There was also language that would have allowed for limited data sharing between your sheriffs and social services when a person is about to be released from your RJLs and is in need of social services. So that language had been included. There was also language that expanded the jail diversion project that we worked on last year. That was called the Yellow Line Project. And it tweaked some language from last year. It also allowed American Indian tribes to provide the service. And finally, the state would have picked up the non-federal medical assistance share. Again, I'm telling you things that were in the bill that we worked on that ultimately were vetoed, but just want to mention them. Min choices. They've been wrestling with language to try and develop some efficiencies in that long-term care assessment tool. There was also language dealing with that. MICA and AMC jointly worked on language that would have required Minute, the state's IT agency, to provide opportunities for local units of government to weigh in before new software is developed, in which counties would be primary users. That had been included. A couple public health issues I want to mention. There was language that would have exempted or put an exemption on the MA limit on telemedicine services for the treatment and control of tuberculosis. And there was money that would have come out of the SHIP fund related to tobacco cessation. I mention all of these things because we worked on them, and I want you to be aware of that was part of the vetoed bill. And finally, I do also want to mention opioids. Lots of discussion on that in the last couple of years, and the legislature had included funding for prevention and a couple of pilot projects in that bill. So what did pass? There were a couple of modest reforms made to the child care system. Previous to this year, child care centers and family child care homes actually were required to post correction orders in the facilities for 2 years. And this is already being done online, so it's duplicative. So that was that happened where it no longer has to be physically posted in those centers, and the governor did sign that into law. There was also a bill that says that minors that are age 12 to 17 who are family members of a child care provider are exempted from fingerprinting if they're not working with the children in the home directly. There is some leeway for the department if they feel that there's some reason to examine a home for some reason. They do have some leeway, but there was a lot of concern from parents that their minor children were being fingerprinted. And finally, there was language that requires the commissioner to provide training to both counties as well as private licensing agencies on identifying and preventing fraud related to the child care system. I think you've probably read that at least in the metro area there have been a couple of centers that they have found some fraud in the CCAP system. So there's language to train counties and others. Another couple of things I want to mention, a priority for all counties was the 20% withhold that counties are subject to if they don't meet certain performance measures related to child protection. That was, there's a lot of support for that on the Senate side. It was a revenue neutral bill, the argument being those folks or counties that don't meet those thresholds are probably the ones that need the money the most. It was the Senate bought that, but the House pushed back on it, and it just didn't get across the finish line this year. It will be brought back again next year. We did play defense on a couple of issues I want to mention. There was a proposal introduced in the House that would have repealed MNsure and replaced the MET system with a new county-based eligibility determination system. And under that initiative, counties would have been responsible for not only the MA population, but also Minnesota Care. It did go through quite a series of hearings in the House, but in the end it did not pass. Work requirements for individuals on medical assistance was introduced and heard in both bodies. I think everyone agrees that we want everyone to work to their capacity. However, there was, as Keith illustrated, there was a cost to counties to monitor this of $120 million in 2020 and $162 million in 2021. So that did not happen on that note. A couple of other things I want to mention. The governor did have a proposal that would have allowed all Minnesotans to buy into Minnesota Care, introduced in the House, but introduced by both bodies of the legislature, but didn't really get any traction at all. And finally, Keith did mention the provider tax. I remember the discussion maybe 7-8 years ago when this happened, that they delayed the sunset by a number of years, saying we'll figure this out somehow. Well, here it's time. It sunsets at the end of 2019, and to my knowledge, there's not a lot of solutions out there. So next year is going to be definitely be discussing that issue for sure. With that, I would close with just saying there seemed to be a lot of activity at the legislature as always, and we were disappointed in the ultimate vetoes in the end. Be happy to answer any questions.
So do you just take and change the dates and all this stuff and present it next? Your work is done, right? It should be an easy year going forward. You did all the hard work, and now you just...
Interesting question, Madam Chair. I actually have been doing that, pulling the bills out and getting them ready to be rejacketed, reintroduced. We're going to have a different legislature, of course, in the House. For sure, there's a number of folks that have retired. Senate, we'll be reintroducing a number of these things, and there was a lot of support for them. I'm optimistic it'll get done. It just ended up in a controversial budget bill, and of course, next year is the regular budget year as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that completes our presentation. I do want to conclude by thanking Winona County for its continued membership in the organization. Do want to recognize Commissioner Pomeroy and Commissioner Ward for serving as your representatives on our board of directors. They, along with our other 13 county members, provide obviously the guidance and create the policies that we present at the legislature. Also want to recognize your staff. Mr. Fritz, we've already mentioned, Dave in terms of his participation on the Engineers Committee and sharing innovations such as he just went through with the other engineers, as well as it coming from some of our other county engineers back to David. Also Mr. Moga, Marine, are also participants in our staff committees and provide invaluable input and share important information with our other county members. With that, I'll conclude. Be happy to hear any final questions or comments. Thank you.
Better luck next year, I guess.
Literally, yeah.
Okay, thank you again, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's appropriate that you put, in my opinion, the what did not happen in gray on your presentation. That is the gray area I always refer to. Thank you. Have a safe trip back to the metro area.
Bye.
Okay. Another presentation. We have to receive the Minnesota Green Corps 2018 report.
On to a more cheerful topic. Madam Chair and Commissioners, as you know, the Minnesota Green Corps program is an offshoot of AmeriCorps. It provides service experience for an 11-month period for young professionals to receive real-world experiences in counties, cities, sometimes parks, and other entities. In this particular year, Jill Johnson and I worked on putting the proposal together. Winona County was honored in something that's fairly unprecedented, which is to have 3 Green Corps members in a row. We were told 4 is never granted. Forget about another application for a year or 2. But 3rd time's definitely the charm. After 2 other excellent Green Corps members, we have Lauren Jensen, who will have a short presentation for you. Something else I want to bring up is, in the spirit of efficient and effective government, Lauren in particular was honored of all Green Corps members in the state with selection by the MPCA, which has the oversight of the Green Corps program, as recommended to the Department of Revenue for someone who especially has used her time very well, the number 1 person in the state. And she's got a little mini video about that, which won't take up much time, but we just got it and we couldn't help but include it. So please join me in welcoming Lauren Jensen.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you all for having me here tonight. Before I get started, if I may present this to you, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
Your work. All right. Thank you.
That's just kind of a hard copy of all the projects I've completed. Should you be interested in any further details on some of them, it has some of the more logistical aspects than what I'll be running through tonight. So just a little bit about myself before I get started. I graduated from the University of Minnesota, their Carlson School of Management in 2016, and have spent the past 2 years in AmeriCorps programs to gain more professional experience. I was in California last year with an urban forestry organization, and I was their project manager for school plantings. And this year I've been focusing on more of a community engagement, community planning aspect role. So as Kim mentioned, we're going to start off with this video. The Minnesota Department of Revenue has a hashtag Our Minnesota video series that they produce, which just highlights different programs in the state that tax dollars help fund. And like Kay said, I was very honored to be chosen as a Green Corps member to represent this program and my projects that I've completed this year. My name is Lauren Jensen, and I'm currently a Minnesota Green Corps member serving with Winona County's Planning and Environmental Services Department.
Lauren Jensen is one of dozens of young people who are making an environmental impact on communities through Minnesota Green Corps. The program is made possible in part by our state tax dollars.
Minnesota Green Corps is a program where we take individuals and place them in communities to help protect the environment, and also provide an opportunity for the individuals to become our next leaders in the environmental area, our next professionals doing environmental work.
Lauren is making waves in Winona County.
So today we're starting out with a rain garden maintenance workshop.
When she's not in the office, her hands are in the dirt.
We have some volunteers coming in to help clean up a rain garden in town at Bluff Country Co-op.
And her head is flooded with ideas to make the environment better for the county.
They put in a rain garden a year or 2 ago to really help mitigate the flooding that was happening in their parking lot. And so we're going to be weeding it out, clearing dirt out of its inlet so that water can flow in there better.
None of this is really possible without grant funding, and in particular the Green Corps program. We're very cognizant, though, that it's an honor to receive a competitive grant like Green Corps or any of the other grants we receive with state dollars, and we want to be good stewards of the funding to make sure they're used efficiently.
Green Corps members are heavily vetted through the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency.
This work's really important to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency because it makes a connection of the work that we do with the communities. A lot of work that we need to have done requires people to change their behavior, and communities are the place where we can start.
Lauren's focus is on stormwater management, education, and outreach.
We're also going to be stenciling some storm drains. So when they see that there, they can be more conscious of, is there oil leaking from my car that's flowing down this drain, or sweeping up their grass from the street after they've mowed their lawn.
Because it all ends up in lakes, rivers, and streams.
We live in the land of 10,000 lakes, and we like to be outside. We like to recreate on that water. And so it's important to me that people are aware of these issues and they're aware of what stormwater is. If they're educated about it, then they know how they can make a difference.
And Lauren's passion for the environment flows beyond her work with Green Corps and into the local waterways where she volunteers.
It's giving people opportunities to change, it's giving them opportunities to be involved, and it's really just creating resilient communities. I think that's really how it's affecting not only Winona, but the state. It's all small steps that we can take at home that really help make a difference as a whole. So again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity for being a host site to the Minnesota Green Corps program and giving me the opportunity to serve Winona County for the past 11 months. It's been a really beneficial learning and professional development experience. So, I am clicking the button. Do you want to maybe just go to the next? Well, the video covers it all.
Is it?
Okay, there we go.
Okay, because I think we have something in our packet we could follow.
Oh yeah, true. Okay, so just a little overview of the presentation here. I'm just going to cover my work plan that was developed, just go through a brief summary of the projects I've done, and just some next steps for the county as I move on. So my summary was to assist local governments, nonprofits, or community-based organizations to implement green infrastructure practices specifically related to stormwater. So a lot of that is collecting, managing, analyzing data, and then just providing outreach opportunities to increase awareness and management of stormwater runoff in Winona County. Specific activities are to design outreach materials and promote any programs we might have in place, educate, offer assistance, and establish working relationships with citizens and local government staff. Build on and maximize the impact of the community engagement grants that some organizations have. A bigger project I had was reviewing and fusing the records of the Whitewater Watershed Joint Powers Board to develop a comprehensive report of their history, and then just assisting the city of Winona with several activities to implement water quality improvements. So one of the projects that I focused on throughout my term here has been rain gardens. They're an increasingly popular low infrastructure development or green infrastructure practice to help mitigate stormwater on both an urban and a rural setting, really wherever. So I've done some targeted outreach, some mailing lists to people, just introducing them to the concept of stormwater, and then easy ways that, yeah.
Can you back just a little way from the microphone there?
And then easy ways that they can get involved with that. And then also providing some engagement opportunities. We did some educational seminars for people who maybe wanted more information on them. And we actually brought in Winona Nursery and some people from the UMN's Master Gardeners program to give those educational seminars. And then just various volunteer opportunities to get involved and learn more about the topic. I also created several educational program materials and a video that we'll talk about in a minute here. And then I've just helped people who are interested in the available grants that we have. So the city of Winona has cost share grants for residents to implement rain gardens, and Winona County was fortunate enough this year to get a grant to offer that to residents outside the city of Winona to have that opportunity as well. So my focus has been engaging residents outside the city of Winona on those practices, more of a countywide focus, and then giving them assistance if they were interested in that grant. So one of the steps there was mailings that we did. So I looked at all of the impaired waters in Winona County. Some of the specific cities I reached out to was Minnesota City for Garvin Brook, Peterson Creek near Lewiston, the South Fork of the Whitewater River that runs through St. Charles, Rolling Stone Creek and Rolling Stone, and then some with Lake Winona and assisting the city of Winona. And really the letters were just to, again, introduce people to what stormwater is, and how there are opportunities available should they want to take any further steps to mitigate that on their own property, whether that be some of the rain barrel workshops that we put together or the rain garden grants, or like I mentioned in the video, just sweeping up your grass clippings so those aren't going into the storm drain. So then this is just an example of the letter which is in that packet that I provided, just explaining that to people, and they were targeted based on where they lived in accordance to those impaired waters. And then for the rain gardens, some of the educational documents are just really to provide an overview of rain gardens and what they are, give them quick tips on how to design them, how to install them on their property, where it might best fit on their property, and then give them ideas and suggestions for the best plant species that can be used in those. So here is the first one that is just introducing rain gardens on the front. The back side is the quick steps to really just installing and planting your own garden. And then again, plant species based on the zones of the garden and some example designs so that people can just take these and use them and do the project. And then here is the video. So in the winter, I had the opportunity to present some of my projects to the stormwater section at the MPCA, and we were just starting work on this video, and it was pretty popular, and we had a lot of people interested in helping to fund it. The Winona County's Soil and Water Conservation District was the first group to donate money to it, and then we had several other people who assisted in funding this project to really make a great educational tool that can be used in a variety of organizations that teaches people, once they have these rain gardens in, how to properly maintain them and take care of them so that they're functioning properly and really, doing the goal of capturing that storm water and infiltrating it before it hits our streets and our storm drains. So I'm just going to show a little clip just so you get an idea of the feel of the video and how engaging it is.
Your yard. What is it to you? Something you walk around in? A chore? Just part of the package that came with the home? Well, what if I told you your yard could be a hero? That's right, a hero. To our lakes and rivers, to our threatened wildlife, and to all of us who rely on a clean water supply. It's time to transform your yard, cut down on shallow-rooted turf, and let your property live up to its true potential. It's time to join the Rain Garden Revolution. What's a rain garden? It's more than your average flower bed. It's a basin designed to reclaim stormwater and trickle it back into the ground. Without this type of planting, stormwater races down our driveways, through our ditches, and over our streets, picking up pollutants and jumping into waterways unfiltered. Stormwater runoff impacts recreation and our lake's health. Salt and grit used for winter road safety harms fish.
So the video is further broken up into segments on maintenance tips, ways to incorporate your rain garden, and then if you have a rain garden, maybe how to reclaim it if it's gotten out of control or isn't functioning properly anymore. So the next project. Was a series of rain barrel workshops that we did. And really, with increasing urbanization happening, it increases the stormwater runoff, which results in flash flooding, soil erosion, and in-stream degradation. So the promotion of these low-impact development has been increasingly important component of urban stormwater management. Specifically, there are many cities and municipalities across the U.S. that are adopting such programs like this and encourage people to use rain barrels or rain gardens to help subsidize and mitigate those effects of stormwater. So especially when utilizing these practices together, it can do a lot more in terms of the benefits that it's helping. And then, small volume for one rain barrel isn't really a lot, but the cumulative effect of them all over a watershed can really help reduce that volume and help the water quality treatment. So we utilized some community engagement grants through Healthy Lake Winona and Sustain Winona to offer these workshops either free or low cost to residents who are interested in creating their own rain barrel. We educated the participants on stormwater best management practices and then gave them the opportunity to implement one. We offered 3 workshops, 2 were in Winona and 1 was in St. Charles, and the City of St. Charles helped fund a portion of their workshop so that it could be low cost for residents as well. In total, it was 54 participants that received free or low-cost rain barrels, and we repurposed rain barrels, or food-grade barrels from J.R. Watkins Company here in town. They sold us barrels from their products for $5. We rinsed them out, cleaned them all out, and then made them rain barrels for residents to use here in town. Here's just a couple pictures from some of our workshops, us rinsing out the barrels to get them all ready for residents. And then some of our features, the Rochester Post-Bulletin actually featured our first workshop on World Water Day. We had 30 people register, and that was a free event thanks to those grants that helped fund it. And then our last one we just had in June in St. Charles, and the St. Charles Press did a nice write-up on stormwater and the use of rain barrels as well. One of my bigger projects this winter was the Whitewater history, just creating a historical report on the Whitewater Joint Powers Board. It highlights their long-term collaboration to promote land and water improvement practices. It reviews their financial and technical assistance, education, and monitoring activities, and really just gives an overview of all the grants they've received since they were implemented and the conservation projects that they accomplished with those grants. And reading through lots of meeting minutes and grant reports, it really was clear how this was a necessary piece to have, since there really was not any place where this was all laid out and written down in an easy to see way of like, here's what we've received and here's what we've done. So these are just a few example pages. There are some example pages in the back of that binder I gave you as well. So of the report that I created, it's about 20 pages right now. It goes over the formation of the board, gives a little bit of a background about the project and how it got started, and then goes into a detailed timeline of the grants they received and the projects that they accomplished. So again, these are just some example pages from the report. And then this winter I also completed a stormwater inventory for the county and the Soil and Water Conservation District. The last inventory map was updated in 2008, and they had aerial imagery that was taken in May of 2016. So I used that imagery of the county to locate any new stormwater ponds that were not marked, and I also went along and added manure pits per request of the SWCD. So the inventory is now up to date as of May 2016 for that aerial imagery, with 324 stormwater ponds that were marked. And really what this does is just giving a better understanding of where the current management practices are so that they can better identify areas of improvement or where new management practices could be implemented in the future. Should they get any grant funding to implement new practices or prioritize maintenance of current practices, this can help them decide how to distribute that. Here's just an example of what I looked at, located ponds that didn't have a little green triangle next to them and submitted those to someone in our department who could help map them on the GIS program. And then I've also done some website updates for the county. I created a stormwater page so that all these educational documents that have been created and these tools to assist people had a place to be and could be easily accessed. It just really explains the concept of stormwater, why it's important to our area, especially in blufflands with erosion and sedimentation, and how it affects our nearby water bodies. It also links supporting, like I mentioned, the supporting documents to guides to build your own rain barrel, guides to install your rain garden, and just how to reduce stormwater runoff at home seasonally. So here's just some examples of what the webpage looks like for that. Really just trying to be engaging and draw people in and an easy way to understand it. And then I also did a synopsis of the county ordinance on the chapter relating to soil erosion and sedimentation for stormwater. So it just kind of gives an overview of the standards that it relates to and flowcharts like this and quick facts to help people determine maybe when they need a soil and erosion or sediment control plan. So specifically for development and construction, when does this apply to my property? There's the quick facts right there that say, okay, if you have this, this, or this is when you would need this. Just to go further into that, for example, if they were looking at this page for construction standards and they got to that second box, activities requiring an erosion and sediment control plan must follow and include these standards. If they clicked on standards, they would get a document of those standards. If they're looking at that document and A says site information as described in Chapter 5, if they click on Chapter 5, they will get a document with that site information. Down at the bottom for K, where it says if a NIFTY's general stormwater permit is required, if they click on that permit, it's going to take them right to that permit on the MPCA's page. So it really just makes it easy for people to find the information that they might need for whatever project or thing they might be taking on.
Sounds like you did an awesome amount of work, but I've always had issues with our base web page. So this is all located, you go to departments and you go to, how do we find this?
So that's what we're working on right now. Some of the stuff is up there. These particular flowcharts are not. I'm working with IT to figure out the best way to put those on our website because it is a little difficult to work around and play with. And I actually heard we might be getting a new website system soon from IT. So we're just, at this point, we're figuring out where we're going to put it, and it will be up there. So.
All right. So ease of customer access.
Our goal is to just have a page for this so that people can go to it, and those are all right there. And whether it needs construction standards, ag standards, or timber standards, there's a little flow chart for each of those. They can go to that flow chart, and then there's all these embedded links for whatever further information they might need, such as permits or statutes or anything like that. So all the documents are created. If that doesn't get figured out by the time I'm done in a couple weeks here, they're there, and that's kind of the next step part that it'll be easy to implement since it's all there and ready to go. Some additional projects over the winter were our educational seminars. We had one in the fall that just discussed a variety of topics to effectively manage and implement practices for yards and landscapes unique to Winona County. We had 52 people turn out for that seminar, and a really good response from our post-seminar survey that people wanted more information on some of these topics. So that's how we did a rain garden one, a seminar on invasive species, and a seminar in creating prairie and pollinator yards. So that was with a UMN extension educator and the Minnesota DNR that gave our invasive species educational seminar. And rain gardens again was Winona Nursery and the Master Gardeners program, and prairie restorations came to speak about our prairie and pollinator yards. And then our winter maintenance. So the city of Winona initially came to me to ask with help on winter maintenance practices within the city, and we kind of extended that countywide by doing the snow and ice material application workshop first. We had someone from the U of M come down and give a sort of presentation training to that, and we had several people from the county and townships come to attend that, Winona area public schools, just to learn about how to properly apply those materials, when best properly to apply them, and keeping up with their maintenance trucks and things like that. Basically, excess salt pollutes our waterways, and it's a waste of money if we're putting it down and it's not needed. Putting down more salt does not mean that the surface is more safe. So it depends on the temperature. It depends on the space that you're trying to cover. So there really can just be more efficient ways, and that was kind of what that training was for. In addition to that, I created this winter maintenance document for the city of Winona to put on their website or just distribute. That just gives residents or anyone really general idea of know when to apply the salt, know the correct amount to apply, and then the best way to reduce your salt use. And then furthering that, alternatives to salt, some links to some videos on winter maintenance practices, and a brochure that can be given out for small businesses or sites around town on how to best manage their small sites in terms of removing salt and snow and just managing that more efficiently. So next steps is that really it's just created a lot of stepping stones for staff moving forward. It's easier to make changes and updates to the websites. Documents are in place for continued use and education to the public on these topics. The SWCD now has an up-to-date inventory on their stormwater ponds and manure pits. And then the template for the Whitewater Joint Powers Board is now in place so that as new grants and projects are completed, it can be updated and no one runs into that problem again in 20 years and is like, what have we accomplished and what have we done? There's a nice list of it all to just really have a quick review and to help determine future work. So thank you all again for letting me be here for this year and do so much for the county. It's really been a great experience. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Do you have questions? I have a question.
Yeah.
You may not know the answer, but it is a question. So do any of our small cities and or the city of Winona have any kind of non-pervious surface requirements in construction? I'm thinking we have a very large project going to happen across the street. We just read that we're going to have a very large parking lot just to the other side here. So do you know, does the city have a, to continue, because I know on that lot you do have some rain gardens.
Yep.
Will they be required to be maintained or?
Well, I know those rain gardens will be coming out for that project. We actually just were salvaging plants this morning to be used elsewhere. I don't know specifically what requirements might be for permeable pavement or any sort of green infrastructure developments here for the small other surrounding cities. I know when we reached out to St. Charles about doing a rain barrel workshop there, they didn't really know what stormwater was or any, so they were happy to be a part of it and willing to help, but it was kind of a new topic, and that's the thing that I think myself and other Green Corps members have come across. In the metro area, not so much a new topic, but elsewhere, people don't really understand necessarily what stormwater is and then its relation to water quality or infrastructure, small flooding events, things like that. Do you know if there's anything specific for that? I know some groups are reaching out to the development that's going to be going here to offer assistance on practices like that.
One of the challenges has been the development of permeable pavement that has, the kind of cost-benefit ratio that helps projects pencil out for use in stormwater. Being able to do a bigger build-out without a stormwater pond has also got to have a relationship to, how much is it going to cost to get the bigger build-out if I don't have to put a big stormwater into a percentage of the project. And so the after maintenance of the installation of permeable pavers requires, vacuum trucks and slightly different equipment besides the mow, blow, and go of a traditional landscape maintenance profile. So all of these things are evolving kind of concurrently, and prices are coming down as more suppliers are coming to the front and more communities, counties, and cities are starting to spec that as alternative stormwater management practices.
Mm-hmm. I know some of the trainings and conferences I've attended this year have been presentations and discussion on more of those practices and grants that different cities have received to implement their own innovations towards these type of things. So it's becoming more popular.
Commissioner Olson.
So where are you going in a couple of weeks?
I'm applying for jobs. I don't know yet. I have a few on the board with some applications in near the metro area, so hopefully one of those pans out. But
they'll be lucky to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you graduated from an awesome school. Go Gophers.
Thank you.
I have a huge number of projects for us, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Can you predict the weather? Is it going to rain the next couple days?
Yeah.
It's supposed to rain. All right. Agenda item, discuss appointment of 2 county board members to serve on the election canvass board. And Sandra, any special requirements, or it's just 2 that are not being non-elected, that are not on the ballot?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, the requirements for the canvass is that the commissioners that are chosen are currently not up for re-election. So that leaves
that narrows it down to 2.
2 that are not up for election.
Well, Well, actually,
and
it leaves us
great.
3 because
Okay.
of Mr. Pomeroy's retirement, so.
Yeah, so we could easily put Mr. Pomeroy on there. One last time.
Well, I
You've done
think
it
you'd-
several
I
times.
think you'd like to ask the active commissioners
Active
first if they'd
commissioners.
be interested. Of course.
Well, this is all done with the primary and then the general. Do they serve both the primary and the general election?
They can, and I believe they will.
Okay.
Or I'd be very thankful if they would choose to do after the general as well, so.
Okay, so do I have 2 volunteers? Commissioner Olson?
I can do it.
All right.
Yeah, I'll volunteer.
Commissioner Jacob? Okay, all right, we have 2 volunteers. Do we need to officially appoint them through a motion? We can. I'd entertain a motion to appoint Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Jacob to the Canvas Board.
So move.
All right. Motion made by Commissioner Kavesi, second by Commissioner Pomeroy. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Approved. You have your 2 volunteers.
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, thank you.
6.4, approve the pictometry contract. Anybody got to give an update? That's through the land records? Predominantly?
Just, that's basically it. The Land Records Committee went over this. This is something we do every couple years. And they made the recommendation to the county board.
I sit on the committee, so I'll make the motion to approve the pictometry contract.
Second?
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Jacobs, seconded by Commissioner Pomeroy to approve the pictometry agreement. I just have one question. Is it in line with past contracts, or is it significantly, no major increase or anything? Okay, all right. Any other questions? All those in favor of approving the pictometry contract, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, approved. I just had 2 things. We did receive a notice, the Highway Department and the County Board, and it does say County Administrator, received a letter from concerned residents of Garvin Heights area. It was a concern about some trees on County Road 44 in Garvin Heights. The problem we have is we have nobody to contact. We have no contact name or information. It's just a general letter. And there is some question from the Highway Department which trees and area they are needing to focus on. So if anybody out in the audience, or if our press can ask the concerned residents of Garvin Heights to identify a spokesperson, we would like to resolve this without somebody. We're at a little bit of a loss as to what the concern is. The Highway Department had looked at it and didn't see anything that was truly alarming by an email that I had received. So we do need somebody to identify the area that is of concern, and we want to take care of it. It's not that we don't want to do something to correct a safety issue with trees. One other thing that was in the newspaper that's been really good is the free ag plastic recycling dumpsters, and they have to sign up by this next Tuesday, July 31st. Driving around out in the country, visiting the ag, there's a lot of these bins out there that's doing a good thing. We aren't seeing the plastic laying around, and it keeps a farmstead much neater and cleaner. But people, if you didn't get a dumpster and you have a need, or the alternative is some smaller recapture bags, contact the county here. It would be, or actually you're supposed to contact the Blue Lake Plastics, and there's a number. If you don't have that, contact the county. I imagine Ann Moore should be the contact person to get them in touch. It is a great service, and it's doing a good job.
And no cost to the taxpayer.
Right, no cost to the taxpayer. And there was an article, actually I saw a news clip somewhere that it was, actually video footage of it, and it was really good, and it explained the number of tons that they're recycling, and maybe it was...
It's an important service on both ends.
Yeah, we're repurposing it. Aren't we buying trash bags or something from this stuff? Yeah, so it's coming full cycle.
Well, it's a material, if you burn, you put off dioxin from it too, so
Yeah.
it's a great benefit.
Right. Okay, so contact Ann Morris if you don't have the article. That was nicely printed in the Post. Thank you, Chris. Any other business before the county board tonight? If not, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Pomeroy to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you.